anyway, so. All right. So modal logic is the different ways that something can be in existence. And temporal logic kind of is similar to that, but it's about how you can be in time. Tense logic, like it says here, is a variety of temporal logic. And it's a branch of modal logic. So modal logic doesn't necessarily have to be temporal, right? I could say something exists, and that can mean now, but it doesn't have to mean at any given time in abstraction, if that makes sense to you. So as long as it existed at some point, or it could possibly exist, then it's considered a modal statement, right? But if I want to make it more about when and how it exists, then it gets more difficult. So let's keep going down here. So this is what they're talking about, and you can take a look at these. These are your classic symbolic logic. So this one is everything, right? So it's like all things. Yeah, I think it's like, yeah. Yeah, all things. And I mean, you can't absolutely be certain of that. So I don't know if you can take a Stirnerian approach to that and be like, is that inherently a theistic concept, like a theistic concept?
Say that again. I'm sorry, what? It cut
Yeah,
out.
so there's the statement that you can have a significant concept of the full set of all things. And this is strictly just logic, but the question is, can you say that that is a theistic concept? Like, does that imply an omnipotence that is like God?
Uh, uh, what's the first part again? I
Yeah.
just,
So like,
it just cutting out.
yeah, for sure. It's just the idea that, can you have this idea that there is
Yeah.
everything in existence without it being about God?
Well, that's a very good question, and perhaps, I mean, what is God? And then it's like defaulting to, if I understand kind of what you're talking about, and yeah, is that the thought that you propose just defaulted that there's an assumption, or perhaps that there is a God, or whatever God exists. But then I guess the question is what is that? Is that just if you look at it from a physics level, or from a math level, like perhaps Isaac might have some more deeper thoughts on that. It sounds like you might have a mathematical background a little bit, but um, if it sounds like your question is there a God? Basically, what it boils down to, and
Oh,
that's
yeah, it's more so that, Stirner is very much against this. It's like, have you ever encountered this concept God, other than it being kind of a, you know, some of the translations say spoof of society. But have you ever have certainty that you have the full class of all things at your disposal? Like, I don't know that we ever can say that we do have that. So that it just seems like it's a thought. It's just like a thought experiment, but really there is a certain validity to even propositioning it that, kind of assumes that you can actually have a meaningful class of all things, and from that the theistic concept comes. So
Mhm.
yeah, so the issue would be, would Stirner be like, well, can we say something else like, you know, as far, you know, the limit whereby the quantity ceases to be meaningful instead of the class of all things, right? So it's like when I stop being able to count, would that be more meaningful to someone who didn't want to be theistic than the class of all things?
And when you say the class of all things, what do you mean?
Just
What
all
does
things, it's the universal. So I mean, it's not really, so omnis is not
like
necessarily
literally everything, like for everything to
right.
exist? Okay, okay. I just want to make sure I'm tracking with you. So, in order for everything, so in order for anything, let alone everything, to exist, that does that mean that there is a God or a God-like power? Is that kind of along the lines of what your proposal, what your question is? I'm not saying that that's what you believe, but is that kind of, and if that's the case, does the God power, that idea, that concept actually exist or not, or
I guess is it a problematic concept to have?
problematic concept?
I
Okay.
I can see
And
it to some degree being like, it does a class of all things, is putting everything into one class meaningful in and of itself, because where we see the value of things or where we define things is usually the difference between things. So having a class all encompassing as one idea, you're not really getting any idea out of it at all, because ideas really come when you separate them and delve into why are they different from others.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I think I would agree with Eric here. Like so going back to the set notation, I'm not exactly sure how the movement was made from like sets to like a theistic statement. Like you can talk in a more limited sense, like the set of like all integers or the set of all cats or something, without going to the set of all things. I don't quite understand that jump, but I
Well,
think
it's because,
I'll
well,
go
speaking
ahead.
of cat, but you can't see her. Oh well. But it's not so much that you're wrong. It's just that when I say like the class of all cats, how do you know that you have finally actually enclosed that, right? That's what this modal logic is about. It's like even for that, even for the class of all cats, when do you know that you actually have a meaningful reference point for that? And that's actually the problem with the class of all things as a part of modal logic in general. It's that you don't actually know for certain that you have something that fits that reference. And it's not even an empirical question, it's metaphysical. And um, just having that as an abstraction assumes its validity. And the assumption is the same jump that happens when you say God exists, right? So I was saying, like, maybe someone who is more Stirnerian in approach might be like, the limit whereby my cognitive faculty can say this was a meaningful set of things. I don't know if there's more beyond that. There could be, but it has ceased to be meaningful to me. Um, so
Yeah, so in my mind, I see like there's kind of two separate directions you could go here. Like if you're talking about defining all cats, then obviously you could come up with like, is a leopard a cat? Is a lion a cat? You could fuzz it a little bit. But I feel like within the more mathematical sense, you could be more disciplined and just come up with a definition and say, you know, there'd be no problem there. Yeah.
Also, if you think about it, as time goes on, the category will expand based off of potentially new cats that exist. So if
yeah,
we look
that's
into
what
the
I'm.
future, the category of cats can effectively, potentially, because we don't know at this point, go on forever, because we have yet to fully wrapped around our minds around what cats will be possible in the future.
Right. Yeah, and
What if our definition of a cat changes over time?
exactly. What about that
Hmm.
too? So these are all problems that they're always talking about, right? So that's just one set of them. The E is existent. I mean, it sounds like we have some mathematicians here, so they already know this. So and then this little L, sideways L, that's negation. So this would be not all. This would be not one. This is not one. This is one exists. At least one exists, and this is for the class of all. And then this one here is, this is your possibility and necessity. And these are more your metaphysical symbols, right? So this is like necessity, possibility, not necessary, not possible. And then this one was interesting. They were saying this is deontic. I never heard of this before. Has anybody heard of deontic? I mean, I can put it together, but there was permitted, and the opposite of not permitted is forbidden, and obligatory, and the opposite of that is optional. But the problem with that is, well, apparently the appeal of the deontic logic is that you don't have to have these wide, expansive assumptions in the same way. You can just say that this thing has to happen or it doesn't. This thing could happen, or it's allowed to happen, or it's not. I don't have to make a omnipotent claim at any point. I don't have to make a full whole claim about a potentially infinite sequence, which is a problem in itself at any point. So this is what is very appealing to people that don't like to feel that. So yeah, this is an example of the symbolic logic. Everybody knows how to read that, right? Everybody here. Anybody need help with that? So necessarily P, if and only if for each world W, it is true at W that P. So why would I ever even need this, right? Well, in a world, let's say that I'm trying to assume someone's experience, right? And I might call their experience a world. And so I know that for every experience, as far as I understand it, they experience time, right? So that would be W. It is true at W that P. So at this person, they experience time. At W that P. So necessarily, so now we're going to put in experiencing time in for P. Necessarily, any subjectivity necessarily experiences time. If and only if, for each subjectivity, it is true that the subjectivity experiences time. Is that true? Can you think of a subjectivity that doesn't experience time?
No, that does not experience time.
Yeah, something that is just like timeless, but it doesn't. Oh, we have a comment. Who are the mathematicians?
I guess it depends. Yeah, I guess again with me, I was like, what's the definition of time? But the way our human logic is built up through the millennia is that perhaps the answer is no. That time is just fundamental, and then it's like, well, what is time? And maybe we can discuss that. But I guess my answer would be at this point, no. Convince me otherwise. Convince me.
You bring up a good point. There's
Say that there isn't, and I think you can start juxtaposing. Well, if everything is in time, it must have an experience of time to be subjective. Therefore, I can posit without being a tree, that tree has some experience of time. I have never been a tree as far as I remember. Maybe you guys have been a tree in your past life and you remember. I do not. But I can juxtapose just using this statement that it has an experience of time. And that's necessary
Yes.
to being a society. So that opens up all sorts of worlds about how far empathy can take you and how far you can actually substantially imagine other existences, right? Hopefully correctly. The whole practice of this is for it to be correct. So this is all pretty interesting. I always like to bring it to like kind of more empathy types of world shifting, because you know other people might be like, in a fictional world you can believe this. I think it's more interesting to be like, let's imagine what is possible for someone else to experience when we will never be able to confirm that. Let's see
Yes.
here. Okay, yeah, this one was pretty interesting. Okay, so Isaac, was it you who said you got your ass kicked in analysis?
That was me, yes, correct.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I tried. I took one look at the math source for YouTube about Terrence Tao's real analysis, and I was like, okay, this is not going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, I totally get that.
You know, there are definitely different types of math out there, and sometimes some people are better at one versus the other. And real analysis was not my jam, but yeah.
Well, what was your major?
Biology, but I did like a applied math, so I was more like real analysis is more abstract than what I'm used to, I guess you could say. So
Oh, okay. Nice. So did you do biostatistics too?
a little bit, not in any depth, but yeah, kind of.
Maybe you can help us with the tree ring thing.
Oh
And then
geez.
they talk about that. I'm just like, okay, whatever you say. But anyway, so this one here, it says the box, which is necessity, and the diamond, which is possibility. So it's saying it may be rephrased as the diamond is in the box. So that is saying the possible is in the necessary. And when I first saw this, I thought that it meant that if it is possible, then it is necessary. But it's actually the other way around. If it's necessary, then it's possible. And if it's possible, it's necessarily possible. Okay, so the necessarily possible part is just like it's probably one of those parts of metaphysics that people are like, why even bother? So it's essentially saying that if I can imagine something to be true, that's it. That's sufficient. Mm-hmm. It could be true now. The only thing that isn't possible is something I can't think of, right? So if it's possible, it's necessarily possible. If I can think of it, it's at least possible. And I can never take that away again. Now that I thought of it, I can never take that away again. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm teaching. I'm a teacher on the side, so I don't want to like go into teaching mode.
At least from my perspective, you're very kind. Thank you for laying the foundation.
Walking us through the basics.
Of your thoughts.
I just kind of wanted to save you guys from not understanding, because I really like screwed that up in the beginning. I was like, oh yeah, if it's possible, it's necessary. No, no.
Because it's necessary, it's possible. If you can necessarily think of it, it's necessarily possible.
That's right. Yeah. The quote that always gets in my head is what Dostoevsky said, nothing is alien to me. That always stuck with me when I read that many years ago. So as I fumble through life, it's like, oh yeah, if I can imagine that, then, that's not alien. That can happen. So that logic, that thought has always kind of stuck with me. So
Yeah,
at least for my mind, so I have a track here on a path of direction. So we're coming to, we'll go through this, you'll lead us through this, but we're basically coming to a common agreement on a set of logic, right? And then going forward, like what's the thought? Like, is okay, we have come through discussion however many sessions, and okay, this is not, we can't poke really any holes in this. This is, what the humanities thinking on these things is, okay, yeah, we take it, we agree, but then pushing it forward, is there, what are your thoughts on that? Like, where are you trying to lead towards, if you even have a direction?
well, I mean, I do have like ideas what I'm kind of envisioning, and thank you for bringing that up because it's always good to have a general idea. What I'm kind of envisioning is like people bring in other parts of the reading as we go through any given piece, and they kind of weave it together, right? So one I would say here, like for instance, with we can actually skip down to the most interesting part. And I wanted to relate this to actually the tree rings because it is very similar, and not just because of the shape, but because of actually the logic behind it. So I just wanted to get down to this guy. Did everybody get to this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I wanted.
I haven't seen any of
was,
this because I didn't have access, but that's fine. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay.
I'm with it. I'm with it though. I'll do my best.
You guys will get
Yeah,
it.
I've
I'm
never
sure.
seen this.
Yeah, I'll do my best to make it quick, and then you'll get it. But my idea was like you bring in different parts from the other pieces and come up with something new and cool. And what I was seeing was other ways of experiencing time using trees. So like the rings are relative to each other and they're experienced as a whole tree, right? So what does it mean for another subjectivity to experience time in a very weird way that we can't even imagine? And I wanted to see if we could come up with a way to prove that we could possibly empathize with this weird experience of time that is very different from ours using metaphysics. But anyway, let's get to this. I'll just really quickly go through it.
Yeah, because it'd be like you can even like use an example of a rock. And I apologize for just jumping in, but it's like you can use an example of a tree. Okay, well, what about the material of a stone or marble? Does it have to be living or not living, or is it like a photon particle? Some of my background is with physics, so when Isaac mentioned that, this example of a cone and the way time is visualized on a graph or on a drawn out like this. I mean, that's, when you think of the Big Bang, you think of a tiny little speck, then it's exploding, it's expanding. So as my feeling is as we go through this discussion, we're going to see, I mean, we're going to say, yeah, that all kind of correlates, it all kind of makes sense. But it's going to, depending on how far down you want to go, like, do we get to the physics of things? And okay, what is time? Well, how does time affect a tree growth, a leaf or a blade of grass growing, or a human, person or a cat? And time, and then it's like, okay, well, time, like then, well, we can get into what's a constant, the only constant in that we know of, and then okay, we get to Einstein. Okay, well, that's the speed of light, and then okay, well, how do we measure speed of light? Well, with time. So we start getting into that. At least that's where my brain goes.
Or we can just say the only constant is change.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very Buddhist. I had my Buddhist shirt on. I don't know if you guys saw it, but it's live in the man. Yeah, that's actually what I'm thinking too. Is like I think that I wanted to create something new. I don't just want to discuss. It's the Cauldron. I'm hoping to come up with something new, and yeah, different ways of experiencing time. Even Dostoevsky was the master of empathy, and if you can consider metaphysics world traveling, and empathy world traveling, then he's the master of metaphysics, right? So even he doesn't really talk about the experiences of time being different for people. So I think maybe like I'm thinking now that we're talking about it, which is what I'm hoping to do, is just like come up with something new. It's like something about using metaphysics to create a pretty solid foundation to juxtapose or kind of envision what it's like for other subjectivities to experience time in ways that are very different from ours, right? So anyway, yeah, if you guys feel that, that would be cool. But really, it's just whatever, like what you're doing is perfect. If you get something, just go for it. That's what it's for. So
And is a like I'm trying to think of something that's like a tool that's actionable on. Okay, so we come up with some hypothesis or some sort of, okay, this is what we think. This is what we think, and then it's like, well, what's the point? What is the point of it? So we like, are we trying to create like? And this is just, I'm not, maybe this will come through discussions, but from my perspective, it's like, are we trying to come up with some sort of algorithm, some sort of messaging, some sort of tool that can then be leveraged for other sciences, or that can be applied to other this philosophical discussions, or I guess that's to be determined, but at least that's in the back of my mind, like, what are we trying to create here other than, yeah, time and change.
I would say what part of what I would say the tool that I'm interested in is like when I encounter another subjectivity, where can I point to the behaviors and acts of that subjectivity and say that is where that is experiencing time, even when it's something weird like a tree. So like later we're gonna take a look at the tree and we're gonna see like how it grows and stuff. And the question is, how do I know that's where it's experiencing time and where its consciousness probably is? And if that is where it is, what does that feel like? And just being able to not only have empathy for other humans, but also for other species and other things that are just so wildly different than us. If that's something you guys are interested in, that's where I'm seeing this one so far. But if you guys take it in our direction and you're like, I want it to do this, like for sure, go for it.
I would ask, like, what do you think, Isaac and Eric?
Yeah, I think one of the words I'm struggling with here is empathy, like empathy with a tree. Like on some abstract level, get that this organism can experience time in a different way. It can be conscious in the sense that it has, it wants to reproduce or whatever, but I don't know like what it means for me to be. And I understand that I can have like a different sense of time for sure. It's, it could be 1,000 years old, but I don't really, yeah, empathy, I guess, is the word I'm kind of struggling with wrapping up.
Conceptualizing its need based off of conceptualizing the need or desire of something that we would normally not consider to have needs or desires based off of external stimuli to time and the environment that they're in. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, so where is it
Would that be like if like it's because, I'm sorry, but would that be because it's like a human? We're only talking about from a human perspective.
Yeah, we would have to like create a new perspective, a non-human one, because our experiences are uniquely human. So trying to build a system in which non-human entities would and kind of try to understand what their system is like, or how they would essentially perceive and have their own set of instincts or feelings about how they interact with the environment.
This would be interesting because then it gets down to, I like where that thought is going, but for me it gets down to needs. So does the tree need? Does the tree have needs that it knows or doesn't know about? Does the rock have needs? Does a piece of my glass cup, does that material have a need? As a human would have a need, or as a cat would have a need, or do we even bring up like the tree needs water and carbon and sunlight, and a human needs water. I don't like how to. I don't know. It's just
That right there is the interesting part, is how do we define this and how do we change and grow that understanding over time?
over time. Yeah,
Everything's over time here.
I what I would say is you start with your human sense of time, and if you analyze it closely and diligently, you'll see how there's leverage to get to other centers and ways of experiencing time. And they actually talk about that in in the reading that we're doing, and they talk about how you start with one paradigm and you slowly create mutual intelligibility.
mutual what? I'm sorry, mutual what?
Mutual intelligibility.
Intelligibility.
Yeah, so that, like you guys, just like what you're doing right now, where you're not sure that you're understanding, then you get clarification. What you're doing is you're making me intelligible to you. Luckily, we're the same species, so that's actually pretty effective. Hopefully, we're the same species.
Yeah. It's a whole other conversation.
It's actually pretty effective, but for things that are very, very far off in terms of how they experience time, you're going to need a lot more mutual intelligibility, right? And this is kind of using cognitive empathy. It's not like experienced empathy. It's not like if you see someone crying, you cry. That's not the same thing. This is cognitive empathy. It's being able to take the position of something else and like pretty much kind of feel what they're feeling, because you're like, if I felt that way in this situation, then they must feel that way too. And using that as sufficient to understand the experience of other things. By the way, really quickly, I just want to say that this might kick us off because I forgot to upgrade it. But if I really like when someone else like takes over at a certain point. So if one of you wants to just volunteer and like put in the chat the meeting you can host for the next hour. And it's just, anybody can do it for free for an hour, but this is anarchist, so I don't like to take the full leadership on it, and just put your invite in the chat. Otherwise, I can do it if nobody has done it by 2 minutes out. So I'll just wait for that. But really quickly before that time is up, I wanted to go through this. So this is the cone of temporality. It does kind of look like a witch's hat, which I think is not an accident. They're very intuitive. But so we have here we have the proto-present. That's you right now. That's how you're experiencing everything right now. And then you have the proto-past. The proto-past is going to be you as you are relating to the future. Now, the only way you can relate to the future is to have collective memories. Nice. Thank you, Isaac. So Isaac's going to take over. You just want to put that link on your clipboard just in case it kicks you off of that too, so that you can.
I wasn't going to take over. I was just sharing a random link that this figure reminded me of.
Okay. That's cool too. We got 2 more minutes for someone to take over.
Yeah, I guess let's figure that out here. Okay. I've never hosted a meeting, but perhaps let's see here.
Yeah, let's have you host for the first time. Let's do it. You can do it.
Because I know with like Google Meetup, I think it's unlimited, but let me see here.
Okay, you just go to Zoom and you click new meeting, start a meeting, and then whatever link you have there, then just put it in the chat, and then we'll head over there once this one times out. So so the proto-past is a radius, and using the memory system, we relate to the proto-future. And so the proto-future is the circumference here. Now, I've seen other models where they actually flip it, where they actually have the proto-past is the circumference, and the proto-future is the radius. And what that means is that you are using by taking yourself in the present, and going to any moment in the past, you are now creating a future up here, like up there. Can you see where my cursor is? Yeah, and then all of this space is the potential of possibility where possible things can happen in the future. So they just wanted to drive home the point that this radius circling around and this proto-present, they're very concrete. There's no uncertainty there. But it's when you try to localize the future, right? You're using the past and the present to localize the future. That's why this whole cone has so much area and space, because that's all a possibility until you actually get to it.
I want to understand what localize the future means. Help me understand that. Localize the future. That makes the future relevant to you, or makes the future relevant to the rock or the tree. Is that what localization means?
Right. Yeah, just really quickly, if everybody wants to put that link on their clipboard so you have it and you can just jump on it. Just in case we get logged out, there's no guarantee we will, but okay. When I say localize the future, I'm just saying imagine something you want from the future right now. Just as a thought experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And notice what your mind is doing as you do that. The first thing you have to do is, what do I want from the future? And so you say, okay, what do I want right now, right? It's based on your future need. And then, so you're taking that center point and you're going, whoop, you're going right through space to the future, but it's in terms of your present self, right? Chances are when you get to the future, you're probably not going to want the same thing. Right? You know, when I was 3 years old, I wanted to be adult. Now, now I do not want that. So, you know, you take what you are right now and you extrapolate it into the future. And then as you think about that, it becomes more and more coherent, and the space of limitation grows more and more constrained as you think about it. Similar to the possibility thing we were mentioning.
So narrowing it down to a focal point, like a focal point possibility, like a focal possible, basically. Like, hey, I want that car. Okay, so now my future, that's like my focus, basically.
Right, and
to
so
sum it up?
when you have this idea, maybe you first see the word the car and you don't really have this strong idea of what the car is, and then slowly but surely you kind of get a sense of